Isabela Cruz and Thomas Reed never imagined their lives would collide in a deadly game of deception. But when the Brazilian beauty began targeting men with charm as lethal as her secrets, the city of Recife was plunged into a chilling nightmare that would leave 4 people dead and a nation searching for answers. In the dazzling city of Recife, Brazil, the nights pulsed with music, laughter, and light. Among the crowds that filled its clubs and beaches, few stood out like Isabela Cruz. She was graceful, soft-spoken, and impossibly beautiful, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and silence it without saying a word. She worked as a professional makeup artist, known for her delicate touch and flawless technique. Brides adored her, influencers tagged her in glowing posts, and clients booked her months in advance. To everyone who knew her, Isabela was a dreamer who had pulled herself up from humble beginnings. No one suspected that behind her bright smile lay something unspeakable. The first sign that something was wrong came one humid March morning. A man named Rodrigo Alves, a respected businessman, was found dead inside his luxury apartment overlooking the ocean. His death was strange. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, and no missing valuables. At first glance, it looked like a heart attack, but the autopsy told another story. A rare muscle-paralyzing agent had been injected into his system, one that could only be obtained through medical or cosmetic channels. Detectives began to dig, but found little to go on. The building's security cameras caught a woman leaving around midnight, dressed elegantly in red, her face hidden beneath a wide hat. The footage was too blurry to identify her, but something about her confident stride unsettled the investigators. News of the mysterious death spread through Recife's upper class, but most brushed it off as a coincidence. Rodrigo had been wealthy, careless, and rumored to have many lovers. People whispered it was probably a jealous partner or a deal gone bad. But then, only 3 weeks later, another man turned up dead under eerily similar circumstances. His name was Rafael Lima, a well-known nightclub owner with a long list of admirers and enemies. His car was found parked near Boa Viagem Beach, the windows rolled up, his body slumped over the wheel. The same drug was found in his veins. On the steering wheel, police found a faint crimson lipstick print. The media exploded with speculation. Talk shows dubbed the killer a Bella Vermelha, the Red Beauty. Social media users became amateur detectives, spreading rumors and theories. The city began to feel uneasy, as if a shadow had fallen over its glittering nights. Still, Isabela Cruz carried on as though nothing had changed. She posted photos of herself working backstage at a fashion event, her signature red lipstick perfectly applied. To her followers, she was radiant, confident, untouchable. To the few who looked closer, something about her eyes seemed colder than before. Police searched tirelessly for connections between the 2 victims. Both had attended exclusive parties where Isabela had been the hired makeup artist. Both had posted selfies taken the same night they died, their faces glowing under her touch. But when investigators questioned her, she smiled politely, offered condolences, and handed over her work schedule. She had nothing to hide, or so it seemed. What no one realized yet was that this was only the beginning, and the woman they admired was already planning her next move. The city of Recife buzzed with fear and curiosity as the news of the second murder spread. People whispered about the mysterious woman leaving behind the lipstick mark, and the press eagerly labeled her the lipstick killer. Theories emerged daily. Some claimed she was a scorned lover seeking revenge. Others believed she was a professional criminal targeting wealthy men. Yet in the midst of growing hysteria, Isabela Cruz remained unshaken. She attended glamorous events, posted flawless makeup tutorials on social media, and smiled in photographs that only fueled her public admiration. Her life seemed untouched by the chaos surrounding the investigation, and this calmness unnerved the police. Then came the third victim, a man who would shock authorities more than any before. Daniel Mora, a young police officer, was found dead in his car outside a popular cafe near the city center. Like the others, his body showed no signs of struggle, and toxicology reports revealed the same rare, paralyzing drug coursing through his veins. What made this case particularly chilling was that Daniel had been assigned to investigate the previous murders. It seemed impossible that someone could get so close to law enforcement and strike with such precision. A faint lipstick mark on the steering wheel indicated the killer's presence, and forensic teams immediately recognized the pattern. The officer investigating the murders had now become a victim himself, turning fear into terror within the police department. Detectives worked around the clock, examining Daniel's phone records and contacts, searching for any leads. They discovered numerous calls to an unknown number registered under a false identity. The trail was convoluted, but with persistent effort, investigators traced it to Isabela's apartment. When officers arrived, she greeted them with the same calm, polite demeanor she had always displayed. Her appearance was impeccable, her manner composed. She explained her relationship with Daniel as merely professional and friendly. There were no signs of guilt, no nervous tics, nothing to suggest she was hiding anything. Without definitive evidence tying her to the crime scenes, authorities had no choice but to release her. Even as she walked out of the police station, investigators could not shake the feeling that she was involved. Her eyes betrayed a subtle knowingness, a quiet confidence that unsettled everyone who watched her leave. Outside, Recife's streets carried on as normal, with music, chatter, and the scent of the ocean drifting through the city. But beneath the surface, a new kind of tension had taken root. The killings were no longer random. They were deliberate, calculated, and increasingly audacious. Police knew that if the killer was indeed a woman, she had learned to navigate public spaces unnoticed, blending into crowds while leaving precise, cryptic clues behind. As news outlets ran continuous coverage, residents became both fascinated and terrified. Social media accounts speculated endlessly about the killer's identity, and online forums dissected every photo of Isabela posted in recent weeks. Unbeknownst to most, she watched it all unfold with interest, a faint smile often playing on her lips. She seemed to study the panic she created, analyzing how the city, the police, and the media reacted to each new revelation. The realization that someone so beautiful, so unassuming, could orchestrate death so methodically left the city shaken. In the shadow of Recife's sparkling beaches and neon nights, fear now lurked in every alley, every club, and every upscale apartment. The lipstick killer was no longer just a rumor. She was a terrifying possibility, and her presence had already begun to change the way people lived, moved, and trusted those around them. Weeks passed in Recife, and the city's fear slowly began to turn into a fragile sense of relief. The killings had stopped, and people whispered that the nightmare might be over. Social media chatter died down, and life seemed to return to its usual rhythm. Streets filled with laughter again, the beaches were crowded with tourists, and nightlife regained its pulse. But behind this calm, detectives never let go of their suspicion. They continued to piece together evidence, quietly retracing every detail of the 3 murders, studying timelines, and revisiting locations. Something about the pattern of the killings gnawed at them, a careful precision that suggested the killer had planned every move, and every victim had been selected for a reason. It was during this quiet investigation that the team discovered a common thread linking all 3 men. Each of them had recently attended events organized or catered to by Isabela Cruz. She had personally interacted with them, applied makeup, and positioned herself close enough to gain their trust. This revelation sent a ripple of unease through the police force. Every interaction had been an opportunity for her to study her victims, and her access gave her a level of control no ordinary person could have. The detectives began to suspect that her profession was more than just a cover. It was a tool that allowed her to select, manipulate, and ultimately eliminate her targets with surgical efficiency. Further examination of financial records added another chilling layer. Each victim's bank account had been accessed within hours of their death. Money was withdrawn or transferred into complex networks of international accounts, disappearing into a digital maze that even experienced investigators struggled to follow. It became clear that the killings were not random acts of violence. They were methodical, strategic, and profitable. The combination of physical charm, professional access, and financial gain painted a portrait of a killer who was more cunning and organized than anyone in the city could imagine. The breakthrough came when the police re-examined the lipstick mark left on the steering wheel of Rafael Lima's car. Forensic tests confirmed the DNA matched Isabela Cruz. With this evidence, the department moved quickly, securing a search warrant for her apartment. Inside, the investigators found items that confirmed their worst suspicions. Among her personal belongings were vials of rare sedatives, syringes, and a meticulously coded notebook. The notebook contained the names of the victims, dates, and other details recorded in cryptic shorthand that hinted at both premeditation and obsession. 4 names were clearly marked, corresponding to the 3 confirmed victims, and an unknown 5th name that had not yet appeared in public records. This discovery made it impossible to ignore the magnitude of what they were dealing with. Isabela was no longer just a suspect. She was the central figure in a pattern of murders, financial manipulation, and careful planning. Every detail about her public life now took on a sinister double meaning. Her photos, social media posts, and public appearances were no longer innocent displays of charm. They were camouflage, part of an intricate web that allowed her to operate in plain sight. As detectives continued their investigation, it became increasingly clear that Isabela Cruz was not only capable of committing murder, she had orchestrated a chilling sequence of events that left the city shaken, fearful, and uncertain of what would come next. The investigation into Isabela Cruz had grown more intense after the discovery of her apartment and the coded notebook. Detectives were certain that the unknown 5th name represented someone who could still be alive, but the urgency increased when the missing name turned out to be Thomas Reed, a foreign journalist who had been investigating the previous murders for months. Thomas had traveled to Recife to interview local authorities and report on the pattern of deaths linked to the so-called lipstick killer. He had made contact with Isabela, attending one of her public makeup events, and had even been photographed alongside her at local cafes. She had invited him to dinner under the guise of offering insight into beauty trends, but investigators feared the situation had taken a darker turn. Security footage from the night Thomas disappeared showed him leaving his hotel with a woman matching Isabela's description. He never returned. The following morning, his car was found abandoned near a bridge on the outskirts of the city, the doors open, and personal items untouched. There were no immediate signs of foul play, yet the sense of dread was immediate. The pattern of sedative poisoning that had marked previous victims was absent, but the calculated nature of his disappearance hinted at a change in method. Authorities suspected that Isabela had learned from past mistakes and adapted her approach, evolving into a killer who could strike without leaving obvious traces. Forensic teams scoured Thomas's car for clues and found a single strand of blonde hair, later confirmed to belong to Isabela. It was subtle evidence, but it tied her directly to the journalist's disappearance. Investigators also discovered faint traces of fibers consistent with the upholstery in her apartment, suggesting that Thomas may have been taken there before being moved elsewhere. The case raised alarm bells across law enforcement, as it indicated that Isabela was capable of transporting victims over significant distances while evading detection. The realization that the killer had shifted tactics added a new level of urgency. Authorities feared that the previous method of poisoning with paralyzing drugs was no longer necessary for her. She had demonstrated ingenuity and adaptability, qualities that made her extraordinarily dangerous. Detectives also began reviewing flight records, hotel check-ins, and border crossings in a desperate attempt to trace her movements. Every lead seemed to vanish into thin air. Isabela had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the evidence that tied her to previous murders, and the haunting knowledge that Thomas Reed had become the latest victim of her escalating pattern. While the city tried to return to a sense of normalcy, investigators faced the chilling reality that the lipstick killer was still out there. Her ability to manipulate perception, remain charming, and strike unpredictably made her a threat that could not be contained. Each new discovery only reinforced the terrifying image of a woman who operated in plain sight, using her beauty and intelligence to cover her crimes. The shift in her methods suggested that more victims could follow, and authorities braced themselves for the possibility that Thomas Reed was only the beginning of a new chapter in a story that had already shaken Recife to its core. Interpol quickly became involved after Isabela Cruz's trail went cold, issuing an international warrant and alerting authorities across South America. News agencies described her as one of the most dangerous fugitives in Brazil, a woman whose charm and beauty masked a calculated and deadly mind. Weeks of tracking led officers to Argentina, where she was reportedly working in a small beauty salon under an assumed identity. Staff and customers described her as polite, efficient, and graceful, with a calmness that concealed the terror she had inflicted in Recife. Before authorities could act, she vanished again, leaving only a single red lipstick tube on the counter, a silent signature that seemed to mock investigators and confirmed that the killer remained steps ahead. Rumors spread rapidly, fueled by both media and word of mouth. Some claimed to have seen her in Buenos Aires, others in Santiago, and still others reported fleeting glimpses in Mexico City. Authorities suspected she had undergone cosmetic alterations to disguise herself, making identification extremely difficult. Despite the international manhunt, her movements remained unpredictable. Each report of her presence turned into an anxious scramble, but the trail always went cold. Investigators grew increasingly aware that her knowledge of police procedures, combined with her ability to blend into ordinary life, made her nearly impossible to apprehend. Meanwhile, analysis of the coded notebook found in her apartment revealed even more disturbing information. Beyond the fifth name, detectives discovered 8 additional names recorded in cryptic shorthand. The implication was terrifying. Isabela's killings had begun long before Recife, and her pattern suggested a much larger series of murders that had gone unnoticed. Each name represented someone she had studied, contacted, and potentially targeted. The realization that the 3 confirmed victims and Thomas Reed might be only a fraction of her total crimes deepened the sense of urgency and dread within law enforcement circles. The city of Recife, once lively and carefree, now carried an undercurrent of fear that refused to fade. Urban legends began to emerge, portraying Isabela as an almost mythical figure, a beautiful woman capable of striking anywhere, at any time, without warning. Stories circulated of wealthy men found dead under suspicious circumstances, often with faint traces of sedatives or a subtle reminder of her presence, such as a lingering scent of perfume. Even in her absence, she had reshaped the way the public viewed safety, trust, and appearances. People became cautious of strangers, suspicious of charm, and wary of beauty that seemed too perfect. Authorities continued the hunt, coordinating across borders, sharing intelligence, and following every possible lead. Yet every trace of Isabela Cruz seemed to vanish, leaving only hints of her past actions and the chilling possibility of future crimes. Her ability to manipulate, seduce, and kill while remaining unnoticed turned her into a legend of terror. For now, her whereabouts remained unknown, but the evidence suggested she was still active, possibly studying new victims, planning her next move, and remaining just beyond the reach of the law. The Brazilian beauty had become more than a killer. She had become a ghost, a warning, and a question that haunted every corner of the cities she had touched. Was she out there again, waiting, watching, and ready to strike once more?